Welcome. I'm so incredibly glad you're here with us today. We are stepping into a very special deep dive right now, one that is entirely focused on you, on your journey, and really on creating a space together that feels safe, calm, and deeply supportive. Today, we're exploring the profound, well, the really transformative concepts hidden within the source material we're looking at, the warrior spirit, a guide to self nurturing and healing.
Yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to look closely at the incredible demands of the healing process. We're going to gently unpack what it actually takes to navigate this path, the unseen toll it takes on your mind and body, and offer you some very practical, gentle tools for your journey. We are going to take our time today. There's absolutely no rush.
I want to take a moment right at the beginning here to simply validate your presence.
Hmm.
The very act of choosing to listen to this deep dive today, to sit with these concepts, it's an act of immense courage.
Hmm.
Healing from deep pain and trauma is it's incredibly hard work. It takes a massive toll on your physical energy and your emotional reserves.
Yeah.
But it is possible. You are
You
possible.
are.
If you're listening to this right now, feeling weary or uncertain, I want you to know that your courage is seen, and this space is entirely for you.
That is such an important foundation to lay. We really need to normalize what this journey actually feels like day to day. Often society gives us this narrative that the hardest part was just surviving the original harm, right? Surviving the abuse or the trauma itself. But there's a painful reality that we are going to explore today. Surviving the healing process can sometimes feel just as daunting.
Sometimes even more so.
Exactly, sometimes more so than the trauma itself. Because healing disrupts the old ways you used to cope. It brings up deep pain, it brings up fear, and it brings up profound, unexpected grief. It requires you to make massive changes in how you operate in the world.
I want to pause here for a second, because if you're listening to this, that realization might feel incredibly heavy. If I survived the hardest thing imaginable, why is the act of getting better tearing my life apart? It feels like a betrayal. You expect healing to feel like, I don't know, a warm blanket. But instead, it feels like everything is being uprooted. Why does the process of recovery have to be so deeply destabilizing?
It is a deeply frustrating paradox. When you are in the middle of trauma, your brain and body enter survival mode. Your nervous system is flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. You develop coping mechanisms just to get through the day. Maybe you shut down your emotions completely. Maybe you become a hypervigilant perfectionist, always scanning the room. Or maybe you learn to completely ignore your own physical needs. Those tools kept you alive. They were brilliant adaptations.
Right, they worked at the time.
They absolutely worked. But healing means dismantling those defenses. It means allowing your nervous system to stand down. And when you drop those defenses, all the emotions you had to suppress just to survive suddenly come flooding to the surface. So if you have ever thought to yourself, I survived the trauma, but I don't know if I can survive the healing, please know that you are not crazy, you are not failing, you are having a completely normal biological and psychological response to an incredibly demanding process.
That completely reframes the exhaustion.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of weakness. It's the sheer biological cost of dismantling armor you have worn for years. And because it is so demanding, there is a fascinating perspective we're looking at today from a guide in the text named Laura. She's just a totally different way of measuring progress. We usually measure healing by asking how much therapy someone has had, or how many tears they've cried, or how articulately they can explain their past.
Yes, the typical metrics.
Right. But
Yeah.
Laura asks a different question entirely. When people ask her how far along they are in their healing, she asks them, what are you doing to take care of yourself?
What are you doing to take care of yourself? It's such a profound question. Are you gentle with yourself when you make a mistake? Can you actually sit on the couch and relax without feeling a massive wave of guilt? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you nourishing your body?
I have to admit, if someone told me my healing was measured by whether I took a bath or got enough sleep, I might feel a little defensive. It sounds almost too simple, maybe even a little dismissive, for something as complex and devastating as trauma. If someone is used to fighting for their life, how does the text justify focusing on something as mundane as self-care?
That defensiveness is so understandable. It feels disproportionate, doesn't it? A massive trauma should require a massive, complicated cure. But the reason self-care is the true measure of healing is because a very common, almost universal side effect of profound abuse is an absolute insensitivity to your own needs.
Wow. Insensitivity to your own needs.
Yes. When you are being harmed, your needs are a liability. You learn that what you want, what you feel, and what your body requires simply do not matter. So you shut that awareness off to suddenly start asking, am I tired? Am I hungry? Do I need a break? Is a radical act of rebellion against the original trauma. It's reclaiming your basic humanity.
But what if a listener is sitting there right now hearing these questions about relaxing and sleeping, and their honest answer to all of them is no? What if they have no idea how to take care of themselves because they have spent their entire life just running on empty, bracing for the next crisis? It can feel like an impossible mountain to climb.
If your answer right now is no, that is perfectly okay. It is completely understandable. You have been far too busy coping to even consider how to nurture yourself. You cannot expect someone who has been running a marathon for 10 years to suddenly know how to sit still and rest. So the very first practical step on this journey isn't to suddenly have a perfect Instagram-worthy self-care routine. The first step is much quieter. It is simply adopting a gentle attitude toward the healing process itself.
A gentle attitude, that sounds lovely, but what does it actually look like in practice? Because a lot of people approach healing like a project they need to aggressively manage and conquer.
Exactly. We try to force it. We think, I'm going to read all the books, do all the therapy, meditate for 3 hours a day, and I am going to be fixed by Tuesday. But force does not promote healing. Force actually impedes it. A gentle attitude means recognizing that healing is not a short-term fix. It isn't a race to cross a finish line so you can finally start your real life. It is a gradual, daily practice. You have to learn to live your life while you are healing.
You have to settle in for the long haul.
Yes. You drop the timeline. You accept that serenity isn't just a byproduct you get at the very end of the journey. Finding small moments of serenity today is a worthwhile prize in itself.
Settle in for the long haul. That implies we need resources to sustain us. And that brings up a really heavy reality that we need to look at. If you have a supportive family or community, that safety net is a wonderful source of strength. But many survivors find themselves deeply, profoundly isolated.
It is a stark reality. Trauma inherently isolates us. It makes us feel fundamentally different from other people, or it makes the world feel too dangerous to engage with. There is a story we're drawing from today about a woman named Krishnabai that paints a vivid picture of what this isolation looks like. She got into a car accident with a drunk driver. The ambulance takes her to the hospital. You can picture the scene, the harsh fluorescent lights, the beeping monitors, the smell of antiseptic.
It's such a cold environment.
Very cold. And the adrenaline of the crash is starting to wear off, leaving her exhausted and vulnerable. The doctor checks her over and tells her she is physically going to be okay, but he has a protocol. He doesn't want her to be alone for the night after a trauma like that.
Just visualizing that clinical environment makes you realize how small and fragile a person feels in that moment. You know a heavy realization is coming.
It's a very tender, very painful moment. The doctor looks at Krishnabai, clipboard in hand, and asks, "Do you have a roommate?" And she answers, "No." He asks, "Do you have a friend you can call?" She thinks for a moment and says no. He asks, "Do you have any family you can call?" She says no. And finally, the doctor stops, looks at her with incredible compassion, and asks, "Is there anyone there for you in your life?" She sits in that hospital bed, searches her life, and has to answer no.
To sit in a hospital bed and realize there is no one on earth you can call, that is terrifying. It is a level of intense, glaring loneliness that many people carrying deep pain know all too well. It's one thing to feel lonely in a crowded room. It's another to realize your emergency contacts are completely blank. So if a listener is in Krishnabai's position right now, how do they even begin? How does one move from that stark isolation to actually finding safe people?
It starts by breaking down what a support system actually is. We often have this vague idea that support means finding one magical best friend who understands everything. But it is actually much more structured than that. A true support system is built on 4 distinct pillars. You don't need one person to be all 4. You just need to slowly build out the pillars.
Let's walk through those pillars because demystifying this makes it feel much more attainable.
The first pillar is practical support. This is the grounded, everyday help. These are the people who bring you a meal when your depression is so heavy you cannot cook. They give you a ride to the doctor. They offer to watch your kids for an hour so you can just lie down. It is the physical labor of care. The second pillar is intellectual support.
Intellectual support is interesting. We usually just think of emotional support when we talk about trauma. Why is intellectual support separated out? What does that actually mean?
It's separated out because trauma heavily impacts our cognitive function. When you are overwhelmed by deep pain or panic, you experience brain fog. Your executive functioning, your ability to plan, organize, and strategize, it just goes offline. Intellectual support comes from people who can loan you their functioning brain for a little while. They are the ones who suggest a helpful book, who help you map out a budget, or who sit with you and help you figure out the logistics of finding a new apartment. They help you strategize when your own mind feels clouded.
That makes so much sense. It takes the pressure off having to figure everything out alone.
hmm
What are the other two pillars?
The third is emotional support. This is exactly what it sounds like, but with a crucial caveat. Emotional support is someone who does not try to fix you. They don't offer toxic positivity or tell you to look on the bright side. They're the people who are willing to just sit in the mud with you while you cry, validating your pain without trying to rush you out of it. And finally, the fourth pillar is spiritual support. This involves the people who inspire you. They are the ones who hold on to hope for you when you've completely lost your own. They remind you of the bigger picture of your life.
Sitting in the mud with someone without trying to hand them a towel. That is a rare and beautiful thing. And there is an important distinction to make about the nature of these supporters. True supporters do not look at you and see someone who is damaged. They don't view you as a charity case or a broken thing to be pitied.
Absolutely not. They see a good person who is having a deeply hard time right now. They recognize your inherent potential and your beauty, even on the days when you cannot look in the mirror and see it yourself. They respect your autonomy. They challenge your old negative ideas about yourself. This kind of respect is what you needed and likely did not have in your past, and it is exactly what your nervous system requires to heal now.
So practically speaking, if someone wants to start finding these people, where do they look? If you're starting from zero, the idea of going out and finding four pillars of support sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting, which is why we don't start by trying to find all of them at once. We start with a very gentle assessment of your current environment. Take a mental inventory of the people already in your orbit. Think about your roommates, coworkers, neighbors, people in a night class, or folks from a support group. You look at the periphery of your life and ask yourself, is there even one person here I could ask for a small practical favor? Is there one person who seems steady enough that I might safely share a tiny bit of how I am feeling? You are just looking for one safe anchor point.
And part of that assessment is also recognizing who is definitively not safe, right?
Mhm.
Because when you are isolated, the desperation for connection can sometimes lead you right back into the arms of people who replicate your original trauma.
That is a critical point. Setting boundaries is just as important as building connections. As you look around your life, you have to weed out people who have a pattern of being inconsiderate, draining, or unkind. You are protecting your fragile new growth.
But what if you can't cut them out? What if the unkind person is a coworker whose desk is right next to yours? Or a family member you have to see at holidays? Or a teacher in a required course?
That is the reality for so many of us. Complete physical cutoff isn't always possible. In those cases, the strategy shifts to emotional distancing. You might have to share a physical space with them, but you do not share your inner world. You keep conversations superficial. You envision a plexiglass shield between you and them. Their chaos might bounce against the shield, but it does not get to touch your core. You reserve your vulnerability strictly for people who have earned the right to hear your story.
But even when we do identify someone who has earned that right, someone who might actually be safe, there is still this massive, terrifying hurdle, actually opening your mouth and asking for help. Why is asking for help so uniquely agonizing for survivors?
It is agonizing because it violates every rule of survival you learned. For someone who is used to surviving alone, asking for help feels like voluntarily giving up control. It feels like exposing your soft underbelly to a predator. You fear appearing weak, or you fear the ultimate devastation. What if I finally gather the courage to ask and they say no? What if they reject me? That rejection would feel like confirmation of every terrible thing you believe about yourself.
So how do you override that fear? How do you take the leap when your brain is screaming that it is a trap?
You have to try a gentle perspective shift. Imagine that a good friend was in your exact position. They are struggling, they are in pain, and they need help moving a couch, or they just need someone to sit with them while they cry. Would you be willing to help them? If they asked you, would you view them as a burden, or would you feel honored that they trusted you?
Most of us would instantly say yes. We would want to be there for them.
Exactly. We naturally want to support the people we care about. So when you deny others the chance to help you, you are actually denying them a valuable exchange. You are locking them out of the relationship. People often want to show up for you, but if you maintain a perfect facade and never tell them what you need, they don't get the opportunity to be a good friend to you.
There is a story that illustrates this vulnerability so perfectly. It's about a survivor who talks about her default reaction to emotional pain. She says that whenever she is really hurting, her instinct is to withdraw entirely. She acts like a wounded animal. She just wants to crawl under a rock, drag the darkness in over her, and hide from the world.
And we have to look at why she did that. She came from a family with deeply emotionally dramatic women. In her childhood home, all the oxygen in the room was taken up by their chaos. There was simply no room for her feelings. If she cried, she was ignored or punished. So she learned the lesson. Go deeply inside yourself. Take care of it alone.
But the turning point for her is so beautiful. She talks about the realization she had when she slowly, haltingly started changing that pattern. She started taking the risk of sharing her feelings with safe people, and she discovered something that shocked her. She found that allowing someone to comfort her was surprisingly sweet. It was tender. It amazed her that she could actually receive nurturing without it being a trick or without a price tag attached.
That realization changes everything. But we also have to be realistic here. The text reassures us that this is a process of trial and error. Let's say you take the leap. You ask for help, and you get a negative response. The person is too busy, or they say something clumsy and unhelpful. The trauma brain immediately says, see, I am unworthy, I should never have asked. We have to fight that conclusion. A negative response does not mean you are unworthy of care. It might just mean you asked the wrong person. Or maybe you asked the right person at a bad time. Or maybe you asked in a way that wasn't specific enough. You learn from the attempt, you comfort yourself through the disappointment, and you gently try again with someone else.
That sweetness of being safely nurtured leads so naturally into the topic of counseling. The role of a skilled therapist is heavily emphasized here, often described as a compassionate witness. But let me play devil's advocate for a moment. What makes this therapeutic relationship different from just talking to a really good friend? Why pay a professional to sit in a room with you?
That is a profound question, and the answer gets to the very core of how trauma operates. We have to look at the nature of the original wound. In almost all cases of abuse or deep trauma, the harm happened in a relationship. It was inflicted by people who should have been trustworthy: parents, caregivers, partners, authority figures. Because the wound is inherently relational, the deepest healing must also happen in a relationship.
So you cannot heal relational wounds entirely in isolation, no matter how much you meditate or journal.
Exactly. You can regulate your nervous system alone, but you learn trust and connection. A good counselor provides a highly structured, boundaried, safe relationship. Unlike a friendship, which is a two-way street of give and take, therapy is entirely focused on you. It provides a consistent environment where you can slowly, week by week, come to know your own goodness reflected back at you.
There is a specific psychological concept mentioned here: unconditional positive regard. What does that actually mean in the context of sitting in a therapy room?
Unconditional positive regard is essentially a therapist's way of demonstrating, I accept and support you completely no matter what you say or do in this room. You do not have to earn my respect. You don't have to perform for me. You can show up angry. You can show up messy. You can tell me the ugliest thoughts you have, and I will not abandon you.
There is a quote from Laura that captures this so movingly. She says that when she was in the depths of her trauma and completely unable to believe in herself, her counselor believed in her. Week after week, the therapist sat there as a loving witness. She accepted Laura not for what she accomplished, not for how well she was healing, but simply for who she was. It is that steady, unchanging acceptance that allows the frozen, terrified parts of ourselves to finally thaw.
And we also need to clarify what a therapist is not. A good therapist is not an auto mechanic.
I love that analogy. Explain the auto mechanic idea.
When you take your car to a mechanic, you hand over the keys, and the mechanic opens the hood, tinkers around, pulls out broken parts, installs new ones, and fixes the machine for you. A therapist is not there to tinker with you. They aren't there to invasively dig around in your brain and fix you, because you are not a broken machine. You do not need to be fixed. You need to be witnessed. Therapy is a collaborative space where feelings are gently reclaimed, where ancient hurts are allowed to resolve at their own pace, and where the future slowly opens up with possibility. The therapist holds the flashlight, but you are the one walking the path.
Reclaiming your worth is the central theme here. And interestingly, while receiving care is vital, there is another avenue explored for validating self-worth: the rewards of giving to others. Helping someone else can sometimes lift you out of the quicksand of your own pain and connect you meaningfully with the world.
Yes, there is a wonderful example of a survivor who started working in a soup kitchen on Thursday afternoons. She found immense unexpected relief there. When you are deep in trauma processing, your internal world is incredibly loud and demanding. But at the soup kitchen, there were no big emotional expectations placed on her. She could just stand at a counter and concentrate entirely on chopping chickens or dicing potatoes.
There's a meditative quality to that kind of physical, repetitive task.
Absolutely. It grounds you in your body. As she put it, as long as she was getting the potato salad into the bowls, she was good enough. She didn't have to process her childhood. She just had to chop the potatoes. It was a safe way to exist, to be part of a community, and to contribute without any psychological pressure.
But I want to push back on this a little bit, or at least establish a boundary. If someone has survived trauma, especially complex relational trauma, they are often chronic people pleasers. They fawn. They have learned that the only way to be safe is to abandon their own needs and serve everyone else. Isn't telling a survivor to go volunteer at a soup kitchen just feeding that unhealthy coping mechanism?
That is such a vital question, and you are highlighting a crucial caveat. If focusing on others has historically been your survival tactic, if giving is a compulsion you use to avoid sitting with your own pain, then that pattern must be interrupted. If you are exhausted, completely depleted, and you still say yes to running the school bake sale because you feel guilty, that is not healing. That is self-abandonment. Your own healing has to be the absolute priority. You cannot pour from an entirely empty cup. Giving only becomes therapeutic when your cup is full enough that the giving feels like a choice, not a frantic necessity.
Holding that boundary requires immense self-awareness. And protecting your energy brings us to one of the most intense visceral demands of the healing process: navigating panic and overwhelm. Let's talk about the physical reality of fear.
We need to spend real time here because panic is where so many survivors feel they are losing their minds. First, we have to normalize fear. Fear is a normal, healthy biological response to danger. It is designed to keep you safe. But there is a massive distinction between fear and panic. Fear is proportional to the situation. Panic is fear that has spiraled entirely out of control. It happens when the amygdala, the smoke alarm of your brain malfunctions, the past intrudes on the present, and your body reacts as though the trauma is happening right now in this exact current moment, even if you are perfectly safe.
And the truly terrifying part is that the triggers for this panic can be completely unconscious. You might be walking down the street feeling fine, and suddenly you're gripped by absolute terror, and you have no idea why.
Exactly. Because trauma memories are stored in the body, not just in a chronological narrative in your mind. The body remembers sensory details. There's a story shared about a woman named Randy Taylor that illustrates this. She would experience intense, debilitating panic every single time she stopped her car at a red light.
A red light. Something so mundane, something you encounter a dozen times a day.
Yes. And she didn't understand why her heart would start pounding and she couldn't breathe. Her logical brain knew she was just driving to the grocery store. But eventually, she realized what was happening biologically. The physical sensation of being boxed in at the intersection, cars in front of her, cars behind her, unable to move it, mirrored the physical feeling of being trapped and pinned down during her past abuse. Her logical brain wasn't engaged. Her body simply registered trapped and hit the panic button.
That highlights why the physical symptoms of panic are so overwhelming. It's not just feeling nervous. It is a full-body hijack. Let's list these bodily reactions to deeply normalize them for anyone listening. If you have ever felt your heart racing so fast you think you're having a heart attack, if you have broken into a sudden cold sweat, if you feel like you cannot get enough air into your lungs no matter how hard you breathe,
Or if you experience derealization or altered vision, where the world suddenly looks strange, flattened, or far away, you might feel a desperate electric urge in your legs to run, or you might freeze completely, unable to speak. You might literally feel like you are going crazy. If you have felt these things, I want to say this very clearly, you are not crazy. Your body is doing exactly what it was designed to do when facing a mortal threat. It is having a normal biological response to an abnormal, unresolved memory.
there is a powerful story shared about Laura's first major panic attack when she was 20 years old. The fear started snowballing, and she had no tools to stop it. She didn't know how to find the release valve. She called her best friend in a state of absolute terror and told her, "I feel like either I'll realize God, go insane, or kill myself."
The intensity of that statement is staggering, but it is so real. When you are in the grip of panic, you truly believe you will not survive the next 5 minutes. But her friend gave her a piece of priceless, simple advice that carried her through that moment. She didn't try to analyze her trauma. She just said, "Breathe, Laura, just breathe."
Just breathe. It sounds almost aggressively simple. When someone is in terror, their instinct is to rush into a frenzy of action to escape the feeling. We want to do something, anything to make it stop. Pacing, frantically calling people, trying to mentally solve the trauma right then and there.
Yes, the urge to flee is immense, but rushing into a frenzy of action can actually escalate the terror because rapid, erratic movement signals to the brain that there really is a predator chasing you. The advice is counterintuitive. Do not rush into action. Just sit with the feeling. Anchor your feet to the floor. Reassure yourself, out loud if you have to, that this is a chemical wave in your brain. It is a feeling, and feelings always change. No panic attack lasts forever. The body physically cannot sustain that level of adrenaline indefinitely. It will pass.
And a quick note on safety here. Expressing deep, intense feelings is a vital part of healing, but only in a safe setting. If you feel a panic attack coming on while you are doing something like driving a car, your only job is to pull over safely. You do not try to process trauma behind the wheel.
Absolutely. Safety first. Always. So, if we are supposed to breathe and let it pass, how do we actively manage the physical overwhelm? The key insight here is that the most effective way to deal with panic is to catch it early. Once a full-blown panic attack takes over, your prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of your brain, it shuts down. You literally lose access to your ability to think clearly. Because of this biological reality, you need to create a toolbox for calming down, and you need to write it down before you need it.
You cannot invent a strategy while the house is on fire. You need a fire escape plan already taped to the door.
Precisely. You need a pre-written list. And the strategy behind this list is crucial. It shouldn't be a list of profound psychological affirmations. It should be a list that aggressively engages your five senses: touch, hearing, sight, taste, and smell. Sensory input is the fastest way to bypass the panicked amygdala and force the brain back into the present moment.
We have a 21-point sample list to walk through, and the variety on this list is what makes it so brilliant. It gives you options depending on where you are and what you are capable of doing in that moment. Let's look at some of the key elements and unpack why they actually work.
Step 1 is the foundation. Breathe. Slow, deep breaths into the belly. This activates the vagus nerve, which acts as the brake pedal for your nervous system. Step 2, look around at your environment. Count 5 things you can see. Acknowledge where you actually are right now to prove to your brain that you are not in the past.
Then the list moves into gentle, soothing actions. Put on a relaxation tape or white noise. Get in a rocking chair. Why is rocking so common on these lists?
Rocking is incredibly soothing because it engages the vestibular system in the inner ear. It mimics the rhythm of a mother's heartbeat or being rocked as an infant. It is a primal biological signal for safety. The list continues with reaching out. Call a specific person. Have their name and number written down so you don't have to search your phone. And if they don't answer, have the next specific person's number ready. Do not let a voicemail send you into a spiral of rejection.
Next is sensory grounding. Pet a cat or a dog. Take a hot bath. Do a simple physical task like sweeping the floor, washing the dishes, scrubbing the stove.
Let's look at why scrubbing a stove works. First, the smell of the soap engages the olfactory system. The feeling of the water engages touch. But more importantly, sweeping or scrubbing is bilateral stimulation. You are moving your arms back and forth across your body. This helps integrate the left and right hemispheres of the brain. Plus, the physical exertion helps burn off the massive dump of adrenaline coursing through your veins.
The list also includes emotional releases. Yell into a pillow if the energy needs to come out loudly. Listen to soothing music. Draw, paint, or work with clay. Again, getting your hands moving. Eat a specific, comforting, healthy food that you intentionally keep on hand to engage your sense of taste. And what is the most empowering part of this 21-point list?
The absolute genius of the list is the very last step. Step 21 simply says, start again at the top.
That is so relieving. If you get all the way through 20 steps and you are exhausted but still panicked, you don't have panic about being panicked. You don't have to invent a new strategy. You just loop back to step 1 and keep going.
While you are using your list, there are also very clear boundaries of things you must avoid during a state of panic. Stay off the road. Do not drive. Avoid alcohol or drugs because altering your consciousness when you are already disassociated is dangerous. Do not make any big life decisions. Do not send that email. Do not quit your job. Do not break up with your partner. And absolutely avoid people who are not safe or trustworthy. You are in a highly vulnerable state, and your only job is to protect yourself until the storm passes.
So let's say the storm passes. The panic attack peaks, the adrenaline burns out, and it is over. The immediate instinct for most people is probably just to pretend it didn't happen, get up, and try to force themselves back into their day. Is that the right move? What do you do in the aftermath?
The very first thing you do is acknowledge the profound toll it took on your body. Emotional intensity is incredibly exhausting. Surviving a panic attack is like running a sprint. So the first step is always to rest. Lie down. Drink a glass of water. Replenish your energy. Do not immediately try to analyze what happened.
But eventually, you do need to figure out what caused it, right? How do you do that detective work without triggering yourself all over again?
Once you have rested and feel neurologically balanced again, then you can do a little gentle reflection. You ask yourself specific questions to identify the trigger. What was the last thing I remember before feeling overwhelmed? Where was I standing? Who was I with? Was there a sensory reminder? Did I smell a specific cologne, hear a certain tone of voice, or feel a texture that mimics the past?
The story of the survivor in the kitchen perfectly illustrates how subtle these state-dependent memory triggers can be. She was standing in her kitchen, and she noticed herself getting more and more depressed, anxious, and foggy. She knew the tools. She tried deep breathing. She started cutting up vegetables to stay present and grounded. But the dread only grew heavier.
It wasn't until she looked up and noticed the physical environment that things clicked. The kitchen was dimly lit, it was dusk, and she hadn't turned the main lights on. She walked over, flipped the switch for the bright overhead light, and almost immediately felt the anxiety lift.
The lighting was the trigger.
Yes. She realized that the dim, shadowy lighting was a subconscious sensory trigger that perfectly matched the atmosphere of the house she grew up in, a house filled with abuse. Her adult mind was trying to chop vegetables, but her body saw the shadows and remembered the terror of her childhood. Discovering those triggers is a powerful way to demystify the panic and reclaim your environment. You learn, I am not crazy, I just need to turn on the lights.
As we talk about these intense feelings, I want to gently move the conversation into a space that requires immense care, respect, and validation. We are going to talk about navigating the darkest moments of the healing journey, the moments involving safety and survival.
I want to speak directly to you right now with all the compassion and care in the world. As we discuss this, please take a deep breath and know that you are safe in this moment. The text acknowledges a deeply painful, heavily stigmatized truth. Sometimes the pain, the self-loathing, or the sheer weariness of fighting this daily battle is so great that a survivor might feel they want to die. They might feel that they simply cannot do it anymore.
If you have ever felt that way, please know that we hear you. We are not turning away from that pain. The text deeply validates that these are authentic feelings. They are real, they are incredibly heavy, and they should not be denied, shamed, or minimized. It makes perfect logical sense that carrying the weight of trauma for years would make you feel utterly exhausted. Your desire for the pain to stop is a valid human desire.
But alongside that deep, unwavering validation of your pain, there is a crucial, non-negotiable boundary that must be established. It is a boundary built on love and respect for your life. The principle is this. It is okay to feel as devastated as you feel. It is just not okay to hurt yourself. Your feelings are completely allowed to exist in whatever messy, overwhelming form they take. Acting on them in a way that harms your physical body is not.
It is a profound distinction. The feeling is acceptable. The action is not. But how do we understand the root of these darkest thoughts? Where does that intense desire to end things come from in a survivor?
The text offers a powerful psychological framework for this. It explains that suicidal ideation in trauma survivors is very often anger turned inward. When you were being harmed, especially as a child, you could not express anger at your abuser. It wasn't safe. You were completely dependent on them. So you were taught to swallow that anger, to turn it against yourself. You decided, I must be bad. I must deserve this.
So the self-hatred is actually misplaced rage.
Exactly. Refocusing that anger, turning it outward toward the people who actually caused the harm where it rightfully belongs, can begin to dissipate that intense self-hatred. You realize that the toxic shame you are carrying does not belong to you. It belongs to the person who hurt you.
And when you are in the thick of that emotional anguish, when the wave of despair is cresting, the text uses a brilliant analogy. It compares the experience of waiting out suicidal ideation to a difficult childbirth.
It is such an apt metaphor. If you think about the laboring person in the middle of a massive contraction, the pain is all-encompassing. In that exact moment, they truly believe they cannot handle another wave of pain. It feels infinite. It feels like it will consume them. But physiologically, the contraction peaks, and then it must recede. It passes. The pain breaks. The anguish of trauma is exactly the same. The peak of the despair feels permanent, but it is actually a contraction. You can learn to bear down and wait out the pain. It will pass.
To help you wait it out to survive the contraction, practical safety steps are absolutely essential. This is where preparation saves lives. Keep a crisis hotline and your therapist's number easily accessible. Not buried in a drawer, not saved deep in your contacts under a vague name, but written on a piece of paper right where you can see it when your vision is clouded by distress.
The text also emphasizes the importance of a no-suicide contract. This is typically an agreement made with a trusted therapist. It is a promise that before you take any action to harm yourself, you will call them and you will wait for a callback. Or you agree that if you cannot maintain your own safety, you will take yourself to a hospital. It is a tangible safety net built on mutual trust. It removes the burden of decision-making when you are in crisis.
There's a journal entry shared in the text that is so inspiring, so resilient, it takes your breath away. It captures the dual reality of this struggle perfectly. It is from a survivor who writes openly about hating life, hating the relentless pain, and wanting nothing more than to crawl into the dark earth and rest.
But then, in the very same entry, she writes about this incredible, stubborn, almost defiant strength inside of her. She notes that she survived 3 attempts, and yet there is still a force inside her, burning quietly. It keeps her going, it pushes her to cry, to feel the agonizing feelings, to share her story, and ultimately to choose to live.
That stubborn strength is the very definition of the warrior spirit. It is the refusal to let the trauma have the final word.
It truly is. The text reminds us that every single time you bear the pain without self-harm, every time you pick up the phone and reach out for help instead of isolating, every time you choose to befriend yourself through the anguish, you are building that warrior spirit. You are actively winning the battle against the brainwashing of your past. You are choosing life, and that choice is monumental.
And choosing life means finding places in this world where you can actually rest. Let's transition into the concept of creating safe spaces, both externally in your environment and internally in your mind.
Finding a physical sanctuary in your home is vital. When your nervous system is fragile, you need a physical space that signals absolute safety. And it doesn't have to be a traditional space like a cozy bed or a reading nook. The text shares the story of a survivor whose ultimate safe space was sleeping in her closet, curled up on top of her shoes.
Sleeping in a closet on top of shoes might sound incredibly sad to an outsider who doesn't understand trauma. But structurally, it is actually brilliant, isn't it?
It is neurologically brilliant. It was a coping mechanism from childhood. A closet is enclosed. It provides compression, predictability, and a sense of being hidden from predators. For her, it provided a deep, visceral sense of comfort and enclosed safety. If your safe space is sitting in a dry bathtub or hiding under a weighted blanket under a desk, that is valid.
There's also a beautiful, stark piece of advice from a survivor named Ellen about what to do when even your safe space feels unbearable. She tells people that if you feel like you absolutely cannot make it through the night, if the despair is too thick and you're afraid of what you might do, just sit down in a chair and do not get up.
Just stay in the chair. It is such raw, practical wisdom. She says it might be the most miserable, agonizing night of your entire life, but morning will come, the sun will rise, the long night will break, and you will be alive without having hurt yourself. Sometimes safety isn't about feeling calm. Sometimes safety just looks like staying anchored in the chair until the sun comes up.
But for many people carrying complex trauma, the physical world isn't the only place that feels dangerous. Often, the body itself feels like a terrifying place to inhabit. When trauma happens to your physical body, bringing your awareness inside your own skin can make you want to jump right back out again. So how do we create an internal safe space when the body feels like a crime scene?
The text provides a deeply soothing tool for this, a guided imagery technique developed by Amy Pine. It is designed to help you meticulously build a sanctuary inside your own mind, a place no one can ever take from you. I'd like to gently walk through how this exercise flows so you can understand the mechanics of it. It begins with grounding. You allow your body to settle on whatever surface is supporting you, releasing your weight, imagining your body settling like heavy grains of sand sinking into the earth. You simply notice your breathing, imagining breathing in nourishing, cool oxygen and breathing out the tension and fear that is no longer needed.
And then once the body is somewhat anchored, the imagination takes over.
Yes, you are guided to imagine a place where you feel completely, entirely safe. A place where you can finally let down your guard. It could be a real place you've been to, like a quiet beach or a cozy bedroom with thick curtains, or it could be entirely imagined. A magic bubble floating in space, an island in the sky, a fortress in the woods built just for you, with locks only you have the key to.
You furnish the space with safety.
Exactly. You notice the sensory details of this place, the calming colors, the sound of wind or water, the smell of pine or lavender. And you are invited to bring a safe companion with you into this space if you choose. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be a protective animal friend, a wise spiritual guide, or even something small and delicate like a hummingbird. You spend time in this space recognizing that it is entirely your own creation. And before you finish the exercise, you anchor that feeling of safety in your body, knowing with absolute certainty that this internal sanctuary is always, always accessible to you. You can retreat into it whenever the external world becomes too much.
Having that internal anchor is incredibly powerful. But we also have to talk about the reality of biology. There are times when the nervous system is so profoundly disrupted, so biochemically stuck in overdrive, that grounding exercises, breathing, and safe spaces simply aren't enough to break the loop. This brings us to a highly nuanced and sometimes difficult topic, the role of medication in the healing process.
This is a massive topic. There are so many valid fears and misconceptions surrounding psychiatric medication, especially in the survivor community.
There really are. Let's look at those fears honestly. Many survivors fear that taking medication implies a moral weakness, that they just aren't trying hard enough in therapy. They fear it will turn them into a numb zombie, incapable of feeling joy. Or they fear that taking a pill will cut off their emotions and actually delay their real healing by artificially masking the pain.
The text deeply, thoroughly validates these fears because they are rooted in reality. There is a very real, documented history of medication being used improperly, especially on women in marginalized groups, as a way to silence them or make them more compliant.
To validate this caution, the text shares negative experience with medication. It is a story about a mother whose daughter had attempted suicide. The mother was in therapy and she was crying, expressing her profound grief and terror. The therapist immediately pushed for her to take medication, simply to stop her from crying in the office.
And the mother pushed back because she knew her own process. She had spent years shut down, unable to access her emotions. She had worked incredibly hard just to be able to cry, to finally feel her natural sadness. Masking that normal, necessary grief with medication felt dismissive and entirely wrong for her healing. Her tears were a victory, not a symptom to be suppressed.
That story is vital because it honors the survivor's intuition. But the text also balances this by explaining the complex biological reality of severe trauma. We know now that extreme early trauma doesn't just cause bad memories, it literally disrupts brain chemistry and alters neurological systems.
Yes, the neurobiology of trauma is undeniable. Severe trauma can damage the hippocampus, enlarge the amygdala, and leave you in a constant exhausting state of hyperarousal or trapped in a debilitating physiological depression. When your nervous system is biologically stuck in overdrive and you cannot sleep, eat, or think straight for months on end, medications like SSRIs, anti-anxiety meds, or antipsychotics can help balance the biochemical scales.
And to illustrate that biological support, the text shares a profound positive experience. It is about a survivor who is doing all the right things. She tried intense therapy, she exercised daily, she tried herbal remedies and meditation, but the visceral physical fear just wouldn't let up. Her body was stuck in terror.
She was exhausted. She finally agreed to try a low dose of antidepressants. She was terrified it would make her a zombie, that she would lose her personality. But instead, she found that it simply took the edge off. It lowered the deafening volume of the terror just enough so that she could actually engage her prefrontal cortex and do the difficult cognitive work of therapy. It didn't erase her feelings. It gave her the bandwidth to process them. It didn't stop her healing. It enabled it.
If medication is a tool a listener's considering, the text emphasizes some critical medical safety rules that we must highlight.
These are non-negotiable for your safety. First, never quit a psychiatric medication cold turkey. Sudden withdrawal can cause severe, dangerous rebound effects in your brain chemistry. Second, never take someone else's drugs, no matter how helpful they claim they are. Brain chemistry is highly individual. And third, always work with a compassionate, trauma-informed psychiatrist who is highly experienced with PTSD, who listens to you, and who respects your autonomy to say, "This isn't working for me."
Whether you're using intense therapy, grounding exercises, medication, or a combination of all three, all of these tools ultimately funnel into one core overarching goal: the daily practice of nurturing yourself. The text makes it so undeniably clear that self-care is not a luxury. It is not something reserved only for moments of severe crisis or breakdown. It's a daily habit. It should be as routine, mundane, and unquestioned as brushing your teeth.
Self-care is the absolute core of healing. It is how you demonstrate, through your actions, love and respect for the child you were, the adult you are now, and the person you're becoming. It is you proving to your own nervous system that you are worthy of care. The text shares the voices of several survivors, detailing the beautiful, varied, highly personal ways they nurture themselves. I think we should dedicate time to linger on these voices, to show just how broad and creative self-care can be.
I'll share one that stood out to me. A survivor says, I love sushi, so I go out and have sushi. It can literally be that simple. It doesn't have to be a profound spiritual retreat. It is identifying a simple desire and fulfilling it without guilt. Another survivor says, I make myself a big cup of tea and curl up with a book. Or I take a really hot bath with some nice bath oil and stay in there with a book till the water gets cold.
Notice how sensory that is. The taste of the tea, the heat of the water, the smell of the oil, it brings the body back to the present. Another survivor talks about setting protective boundaries as their form of self-care. They say, I set aside times in my week when I plan to come home and not think about my abuse, or I go out with a friend and we agree explicitly not to talk about it.
That boundary is a deep act of self-care. It is giving your brain permission to put down the heavy backpack for a few hours. Another uses affirmations, placing notes all over her room so she sees them constantly. I am gentle and patient with myself. I am good. I forgive myself.
One survivor says, when I come out of a heavy therapy session, no matter what it feels like, no matter how much I cried, I always buy myself flowers. She rewards her own courage. And another shares a beautiful story about buying an emerald green dress. Not because it was practical, not because it was on sale or she needed it for an event, but just because it was gorgeous and she felt beautiful in it. It was a pure, unadulterated gift to herself.
And finally, there is the survivor who found a profound healing metaphor in the earth itself. She bought a house that came with an incredibly overgrown, tangled garden. She went out with pruning shears and over the course of weeks cleared 20 massive loads of debris.
The physical labor of that is amazing. She said that each time she turned over a shovelful of dirt, or pulled up a dead root, or planted something new, it felt like she was doing that inside her own mind. Turning over the dirt was an act of clearing away the old, dead debris of her past to make literal room for new life to grow.
It's all about making room for new life. As we draw this deep dive to a close, let's take a moment to look at the massive expanse of ground we've covered today. Healing is demanding. We cannot pretend otherwise. The exhaustion is real, the panic is real, and the grief is immense. But by systematically building a support system, by understanding your brain and creating a safety plan for moments of panic, by finding the courage to ask for help, and by fiercely committing to the daily practice of self-nurturing, you are actively winning the battle. You are reclaiming your life, inch by inch, from the past.
I want to say this directly to you. Every single small step you take is a massive victory. Even if all you did today was drink a glass of water or take one deep breath or simply sit in a chair and listen to this deep dive, you are doing the work. You are demonstrating the warrior spirit.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day. When we hear the word warrior, culture trains us to picture someone engaged in violent outward combat. We picture someone armored, wielding a sword against a terrifying external enemy. But based on everything we have explored today, everything about the nervous system and the tender demands of healing, what if the ultimate expression of the warrior spirit isn't about fighting a war at all? What if the bravest, most fiercely warrior-like thing you can possibly do is the quiet, radical, daring act of choosing to be gentle with yourself?
That is a beautiful, profound truth to hold on to. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Thank you for your immense courage, for your presence, and for your willingness to heal. We wish you physical safety, we wish you gentle days, and we wish you profound peace on your journey forward. Take very good care of yourself.